Stop scrolling right now. What if I told you there was a city in 1650 that every engineer on Earth said was scientifically impossible, built on water that should sink it, constructed on mud that should swallow it, designed with architecture that should collapse it, but instead of failing, it became the richest empire in the Mediterranean? This is Venice in 1650, and what these impossible engineers created defied every law of physics while dominating European trade for centuries. Here's what nobody tells you. Venice shouldn't exist. The engineering is physically impossible. The foundation is scientifically unstable. The architecture violates structural principles. Every expert who studied Venice's construction said the same thing. This city should have collapsed into the sea centuries ago. And what I'm about to show you is going to blow your mind about human engineering defying natural laws. Picture this impossibility. An entire city built on 118 islands, connected by 400 bridges, spanning 150 canals, all constructed on unstable mudflats in a tidal lagoon. Marble palaces that should sink rising majestically from water. Stone bridges that should collapse supporting massive weight for centuries. Cathedral foundations that should shift remaining perfectly stable on liquid ground. Venice accomplished what modern engineers still consider borderline impossible. What I'm about to show you is the greatest engineering miracle in human history. But more than that, how they proved that impossible achievements create unstoppable empires. Here's what made Venice's impossible construction actually work. They didn't fight the water, they partnered with it. Millions of wooden piles driven 30 feet into mudflats create artificial bedrock under every building. Stone foundations that flex with tidal movement instead of resisting it. Canal systems that turn water from enemy into transportation highway. Architecture designed to float with natural movement rather than fight against it. They solved impossible engineering through impossible thinking. The Doge's palace represents everything that should be architecturally impossible. Gothic arches, supporting massive weight on foundation that shouldn't hold anything. Pink and white marble patterns creating beauty on structure that shouldn't be stable. Government halls built over water where no government building should survive. Walk along the Grand Canal in 1652 and witness the most impossible urban planning in human history. Palazzo after palazzo, lining the water with facades that should have crumbled centuries ago. Canal width calculated to perfect proportions that create both beauty and practical navigation. Bridges positioned with engineering precision that modern city planners study and still can't fully understand. This isn't just architecture. This is physics-defying artistry that functions flawlessly. Here's what's most amazing about Venice's engineering miracle. From this physically impossible city, they built the most powerful maritime empire in European history. Shipyards that shouldn't exist, producing vessels that dominated Mediterranean trade. Harbors that shouldn't function becoming Europe's busiest commercial ports. Naval bases that shouldn't be stable, launching fleets that controlled Adriatic commerce. Impossible foundation supporting unbeatable empire. San Marco Basilica represents the ultimate impossibility. Byzantine domes that should collapse rising magnificently over unstable ground. Golden mosaics that should crack remaining perfectly preserved despite foundation movement. Religious architecture that should be impossible, creating spiritual experiences that last centuries. Venetian merchant palaces demonstrate engineering that shouldn't work, but creates lasting beauty. Caudoro, golden house, with facade decoration that should deteriorate in salt air lasting centuries. Car Rezzonico, with Baroque magnificence built on foundation that should sink. Palazzo Ducali, with governmental authority constructed over water, where governments shouldn't survive. Each palace proves that impossible engineering creates impossible beauty. Venice's canal system solves transportation problems other cities can't understand. Water streets that provide faster transportation than land roads. Gondola design that navigates impossible narrow passages while carrying significant weight. Tide management that turns natural water cycles into commercial advantage. Venetian bridges represent structural engineering that modern experts still study. Rialto Bridge, spanning Grand Canal, with single arch that shouldn't support commercial weight, but handles constant heavy traffic. Bridge of size, connecting buildings with enclosed passage that shouldn't be structurally sound, but remains perfect. Hundreds of smaller bridges creating transportation network over unstable foundation that should shift constantly. Each bridge demonstrates impossible engineering solutions that work perfectly. Here's something that blows modern engineers' minds. Venice turns daily tidal changes from engineering problem into city cleaning system. High tides that flush waste away naturally. Low tides that expose foundations for maintenance. Tidal cycles that power water circulation, keeping canals fresh. The Venetian Arsenal represents impossible industrial engineering. Shipyard, built on water, producing naval vessels faster than any land-based facility. Assembly line manufacturing techniques that won't be rediscovered for centuries. Industrial capacity that makes Venice Europe's premier naval power, despite impossible location. Workforce coordination that creates maritime superiority from physically impossible base. They built the world's most efficient shipyard where no shipyard should be possible. Murano Island demonstrates impossible industrial specialization. Glass-making workshops that require consistent high temperatures built over unstable water foundation. Artistic glass production that creates luxury goods exported throughout Europe. Industrial techniques that make Venice's impossible location an advantage for specialized manufacturing. Venice solves flooding problems that modern coastal cities still struggle with. Acqua alta, high water management through architectural design that accommodates rather than fights flood cycles. Building construction that allows water intrusion without structural damage. Urban planning that treats flooding as natural cycle rather than emergency disaster. Foundation techniques that remain stable despite regular water level changes. 16th century flood management, more sophisticated than modern coastal engineering. Venice creates religious traditions that turn engineering impossibility into spiritual advantage. Marriage to the sea ceremony where Doge drops ring into Adriatic, celebrating Venice's impossible relationship with water. Religious processions conducted by boat, creating spiritual experiences, impossible in land-based cities. Water-based religious architecture that integrates faith with impossible engineering. Venetian architecture integrates impossible engineering with artistic magnificence, Gothic style, adapted to water conditions, creating unique Venetian Gothic impossible elsewhere. Byzantine influences integrated with Italian Renaissance, producing architectural fusion possible only through impossible engineering. Artistic decoration that survives salt air and foundation movement, creating lasting beauty despite impossible conditions. Color combinations that work with water reflection, creating visual effects impossible in land-based architecture. Engineering impossibility, enabling artistic possibilities, impossible anywhere else. Venice's impossible engineering creates commercial advantages other cities can't replicate. Water transportation that provides cost advantages over land-based commerce. Harbor facilities that handle maritime trade more efficiently than traditional ports. Strategic location that makes Venice essential stop for east-west trade routes. Venice's engineering impossibility creates diplomatic advantages. Unique city status that makes Venice neutral ground for international negotiations. Architectural beauty that impresses foreign dignitaries beyond any land-based palace. Engineering marvel status that provides prestige and cultural authority. Maritime tradition that gives Venice diplomatic expertise in international commerce. Impossible engineering, creating diplomatic impossibility to ignore. Venice's impossible engineering creates cultural traditions impossible elsewhere. Carnival celebrations that use water architecture as performance space. Musical traditions adapted to acoustic properties of water-surrounded architecture. Artistic techniques that incorporate water reflection and maritime themes. Here's something that's going to blow your mind about modern engineering. Contemporary structural engineers still study Venice to understand how impossible engineering actually works. Foundation techniques that modern engineering hasn't improved. Tidal management that modern coastal cities try to replicate. Bridge construction that modern engineers use as textbook examples. Urban planning that modern cities attempt to copy but can't achieve in land-based locations. 700-year-old engineering that modern science still considers nearly impossible. Today, Venice handles engineering stress no 1650s designer anticipated. Millions of annual tourists creating weight load far exceeding historical design parameters. Modern boat traffic generating wave action more intense than historical conditions. Contemporary water pollution creating chemical challenges. Historical engineering never faced, yet impossible engineering continues functioning. Venice faces modern engineering challenges that test impossible historical solutions. Sea level rise threatening foundations designed for different water levels. Increased storm intensity challenging structures designed for historical weather patterns. Modern environmental changes testing engineering solutions created centuries ago. But historical impossible engineering continues adaptation through Mosaic flood barrier system that represents modern engineering attempt to maintain impossible city. Preserving Venice represents impossible architectural conservation, maintaining structures that shouldn't exist in conditions that constantly challenge preservation. Restoration techniques that must work with impossible foundation conditions. Conservation methods that preserve impossible engineering while accommodating modern requirements. Venice's economic success proves that impossible engineering creates sustainable prosperity. Tourism industry based entirely on engineering marvel status. Cultural economy that capitalizes on impossible architectural beauty. Educational economy where engineering schools study impossible historical solutions. Artistic economy where impossible setting inspires continuous creative production. Impossible engineering, creating modern economic sustainability through beauty and uniqueness. Venice teaches modern engineers that impossible achievements become possible through creative problem solving that partners with natural forces rather than fighting them. Engineering philosophy that treats limitations as design opportunities rather than obstacles. Construction techniques that embrace flexibility rather than demanding rigidity. Venice's impossible engineering influences global culture. Romantic ideal of impossible beauty, inspiring literature, music, art worldwide. Engineering inspiration for modern architects attempting seemingly impossible projects. Tourism model where impossible engineering creates permanent economic advantage. Cultural symbol where impossible achievement represents human creativity, overcoming natural limitations. Impossible engineering, creating permanent global cultural influence. Venice's impossible success provides template for contemporary impossible achievements. Space exploration that seems scientifically impossible but becomes achievable through creative engineering. Sustainable energy that seems economically impossible but becomes practical through innovative thinking. Medical advances that seem biologically impossible but become routine through persistent research. Venice teaches individual psychology about achieving impossible goals. Impossible achievements require partnering with challenges rather than avoiding them. Engineering solutions work best when they embrace limitations creatively rather than fighting against them. Sustainable, impossible achievements focus on long-term flexibility rather than short-term rigid solutions. Beautiful, impossible achievements integrate artistic vision with practical engineering. Venice proves that impossible achievements create lasting success when they solve problems creatively. Standing in Venice today, you can still experience the power of impossible engineering. Walk through San Marco Square and feel solid ground that shouldn't exist. Cross the Rialto Bridge and experience structural impossible that supports massive weight. Ride a gondola through canals and navigate transportation system that shouldn't function. But in 1652, this wasn't tourism. This was proof that impossible engineering creates unbeatable advantages. that creative problem-solving defeats conventional limitations, that beautiful solutions last longer than practical compromises. Here's the ultimate truth about Venice's impossible empire. They proved that the most impossible achievements often become the most successful because impossibility eliminates competition. No other city attempted Venice's engineering solutions because everyone considered them impossible. No other maritime empire could replicate Venice's advantages because everyone thought the foundation was unstable. No other culture could copy Venice's beauty because everyone believed water-based architecture was impractical. That's why Venice lasted for centuries while conventional empires fell. The floating empire that shouldn't exist teaches the most important lesson about impossible achievement. Impossible becomes possible when creative engineering partners with natural forces rather than fighting them, when beautiful solutions address practical problems, when flexible adaptation replaces rigid resistance. Venice didn't succeed despite being impossible. Venice succeeded because being impossible eliminated all competition and created advantages no conventional empire could replicate. The engineering miracle that defied physics proved that impossible achievements create impossible advantages. Impossible beauty creates permanent success, and impossible dreams become inevitable realities when engineering creativity meets artistic vision. That's all for our journey through impossible Venice. But remember, every time modern engineers study Venice's solutions, every time architects attempt seemingly impossible projects, every time anyone chooses creative flexibility over conventional rigidity, they're using principles perfected by Venetians who built an empire on water when everyone said it couldn't be done. If there's another moment when impossible engineering created lasting empire, another civilization that achieved success through physics-defying creativity, let me know in the comments. Because Venice's lesson isn't about Italy or water. It's about the eternal truth that impossible achievements create unbeatable advantages, that creative engineering defeats conventional limitations, and that the most beautiful solutions often emerge from the most impossible challenges. The floating empire that shouldn't exist proved that impossible is just another word for unprecedented, and unprecedented achievements create unprecedented success.